Hello, my name is Ahmed Mashhour, a power systems consultant. This video is going through a demonstration for PowerSC multi-factor authentication. So first of all, I would like to introduce what the PowerSC, which is an IBM Power security compliance software, runs on IBM Power systems, either in AIX or Linux on Power. One of the functions that PowerSC is doing is the multi-factor authentication. So it could create a multi-factor authentication server and also create the agent for multi-factor authentication client. So let me first share my screen and show you what I have. So here I have here an AIX server, which is a multi-factor server, right? This is a 7.3 operating system AIX, and I have installed also the latest version of PowerSC with the latest service pack. So here I've just installed a PowerSC multi-factor authentication file set, which is the server and the database. Its database is built on Postgres database and of course the license. This is the latest version 2.1 with the latest service pack. For the client here, this is the multi-factor authentication. This is going to be a client, will be treated as client. So the authentication server is the multi-factor authentication server, and this is a sample of the clients. So here also, I've installed a part of this multi-factor authentication, only the PAM, which is a pluggable authentication module, this way. So this is the license for the multi-factor authentication, the PAM, and all the fallback for password management, and also the multi-factor authentication mapper, which is a new file set. So all is for the PAM is the latest service pack. So now, after a successful implementation or successful installation in the server side, there is some configuration for creating a certificate, lots of certificates, and converting the certificates. This is going to be shown in other sessions in details. Once a successful implementation and configuration is done, you're going to see the service, the SRC service for the multi-factor authentication should be running. Since it's running, then you could access this way here. This is the IP for the server, and you're going to put here the port number 6793 and just the MFA admin, which is the multi-factor authentication admin. This is the manager. This is the administrator user. I've also created here. You're going to see it in your operating system first, and we've also created in the multi-factor authentication database inside the metadata itself via multi-factor command line. Then you're gonna log into it. At the first login, you wouldn't see any configuration here like those users, things, and so on. So we will not focus to those users. What we are going to do is we're going to create a normal. We are in the MFA server first. We are going to create, for example, MK user, for example, test 100 and MK user test 200. I'm going to put a password for test 100. It's going to be the same, test 100. And also for the other user, test 200 and test 200. I'm going to also remove the first check or the first login request to change the password. So I'm going to remove it for test 1 and for test 2. So it's not asking you to change your password in your first login. So this is okay at the moment. Then I'm going back here and I'm gonna select the authentication method first, which is what the PowerSC providing here. So let's take an example. For this is a simple thing, which is a one-time password. This is a time-based one-time password. If we're gonna here, we're gonna configure or just change some values. For example, like the talk count, the one-time password is gonna be like 6 digits or 8 digits or 4 digits, whatever it is, and the suggestion for the password algorithm. So mostly we use SHA 256. We're gonna use SHA1, so no problem. The real name is like the umbrella name for your TOTP authentication, which is just named it MFA Lab. Those are the most important things, and if you just change anything like this or here, you're gonna just save it, okay? And once you just change your values, you have already the authentication method, right? And you are only changing the values for this. Okay. The other thing is the policy definitions. You're going to create a policy. So let's create a policy, for example, and name it here as POC, right? In the description, this is a multi-factor authentication POC. Here is CTC lifetime in seconds. I'm going to put just 60 and CTC reusable. Yes, I'm going to 60. Now, what's your method? We've just created a method, which is a TOTP. We just configured. We just changed the values, right? So I'm going to attach to it this method, and I'm going to add the policy. Now the policy is a POC, right? The third step is a user provisioning. Now, forget about test 1 and test 2. I'm going to create a new user. What do you think the user I can put, which is test 100 or test 200, right? So let's go back here. So test 100, this is test 100 for TOTP. And just a password fallback. And I'm going to select here my policy. I just created a policy, which is the POC, right? And add the user this way. Down, this is our user. The thing is, we will not be able to log in by this test 100 because it has been created on the MFA server here, and it has been created in the database also this way. right? In the MFA database itself. But the thing is, you wouldn't be able to look into it to to a client, for example, like this guy, for example, by two things. This guy, I'm gonna create the same user, test 100, and I'm gonna put test the password of test 100 test. This is the client itself. But still, we wouldn't be able to use the TOTP this way because we have to enroll the user. So this TOTP, for example, or a one-time password thing, what do you think? We always use for one-time password even a text message sometimes when you log into your account to the bank or something. Or we use some applications like a Google Authenticator, right? Like a Google Authenticator or some application like an authentication applications. You scan some code and you get a digit code and you put the code and this is it. So what we are going to do is we will use an application like a Google Authenticator, which is, I'm not going to use a Google Authenticator. This is a very easy. I'm going to use an IBM Verify application. So it's the same method. But first of all, I have to enroll this user to use a TOTP. I mean, we've created the user, in the database, but we haven't created the user. We haven't said he is going to use a TOTP. It's not yet enrolled. It's not yet registered in the TOTP itself. So what we're going to do is, hey, please, at test 100, we're gonna edit the authentication method. I'm sure that I'm putting here test 100. Then I go down here for this method which we've attached to the user, and I'm gonna edit, and registration state is gonna be open because I have to register this, right? So it's gonna its state is gonna be open, and the digit will be 6, right? Now let's enroll it. Let's enroll this user. How would I enroll this user? We will use the same link for the MFA server, the AIX server, MFA server, but we will put some different URL with an AZF TOTP and a generic start. Here it says, please log in by your user for an enrollment, which is test 100 and test 100. Okay, then what's next? Now it gets you a QR code to scan using your application, your mobile, like a Google Authenticator or a user, for example, like an application like an IBM Verify or any authentication program in your mobile phone. So I'm going to open my application, like a Google Authenticator or whatever, and scan the code. Since I scanned the code, it gives me a TOTP code to just enroll the user. We're just enrolling it. This way. So now the user has been enrolled in my authentication application, and it has been enrolled in the MFA database server. Now, since it is enrolled, I'm going to the client here, and this is my client, right? So I'm going to close it and open my client, MFA client, this way, and log in by the test 100. Do you remember the policy name? It was a POC. You remember this, right? The policy name was, this guy is a POC. So I will put here POC. What's your TOTP credential? So I'm going to open my Google Authenticator or my application, my mobile. There is a mention by the user here. Right. It's the user has been enrolled, right? So once I open my application, my mobile, I'm going to see this user has been enrolled. There is a mention of my user. I just click on it, right? It's going to give me a code. Then I'm going to use this code 360672 and press enter, and it seems okay. So it works, right? So this is really good. Now, let's close this guy and create another user. Good. The test 200. Without a password fallback. So I'm going to explain why. Attaching to the policy POC. So this is a test 200 with password fallback no or off. And the test 100 is with a password fallback on. Okay. Let's log in to the client one more time this way by my test 100 one more time, POC, and let's open my mobile application and get this random code under my user 839. It is good. I'm going to switch to the root. I'm going to switch to the root. Now I'm root. I'm going to create a test 200, right? And I'm going to put a password for the AIX, right? Same. Right? And I'm going to close it. Did we enroll this user, test 200? We haven't enrolled it. So if we open here for this test 100, for example, and you go down to the method, you're going to see here that the user has been provisioned, has been registered, right? But if you can see a test 200, you're going to see you have an option to make it open for registration, right? So let's register this user. And then enroll it like what we've done for test 100. So we are going enroll it. It's going to give us a code. I'm going to scan it using my application. Then in my application is going to give me a TOTP code and submit. So this works. right? This is successful. And now I'm going to use this test 200, and the policy is POC, and let's generate a code from my application under the username in my application because we've registered it. And this works. Excellent. But look at this. If I close this, right, and open my client, right, and I test, for example, test 100, enter. For the policy name, I left it blank this way. For the CTC, I left it blank. I will tell you what's CTC in the future, right? It's going to ask for an AIX password, so I'm going to put test 100, and it's going to log in, right? So it logs in without the multi-factor authentications because I've bypassed it, right? But this is not secure. Okay, how about test 200? Test 200 blank and blank and put its password in AIX. It says no, so blank again and blank and the same password. It said no again and test 200. So it didn't allow me, right? So for test one, it allows me if I have written anything wrong in my MFA authentication, in my TOTP code, then it's going to ask for the AIX password, then it's accepted it. But in test 200, it didn't accept my AIX password. And of course, I was making a wrong policy name and TOTP code and so on. Now the difference is the password fallback. So for test 100, there's a password fallback that allows you to use the AIX login, right? However, when I made it off, it didn't allow you. So it's up to you, up to the enterprise, right? Now let's take another example here. Let's go to the root in my client, my AIX client. There is a configuration file for multi-factor authentication that it's really pointing to my MFA server, pointing to the configuration of the MFA server, so it understands there is an MFA server and so on, right? This configuration file is pamPMFA.conf. It points to where my certificate is. It points to my server that it is going to authenticate from. And also there is a nice option called the CTC prompt. What we've done using the TOTP or one-time password thing is an inbound authentication. Maybe we heard about an outbound authentication, right? So the thing is, there is a method for an out-of-bound authentication called the CTC. A CTC is like an out-of-bound authentication. What does it do? So an out-of-bound authentication or a CTC thing, which is a cached token credential. It's going to add another thing for authentication. So you will be asked at first to go to a web server, for example, which is my MFA server in a different URL. Put your TCP code for your user, which has already been registered. Then it will generate you a password, a random password. Then you will use it for login. So if we, for example, change it and ask them Please use only the CTC. Good. And we close this. And we close my client. I'm going to open my client once more. I'm going to put in a user like test 100. Look at the message. It didn't ask for the policy, so it didn't give you a chance to put your TOTP code at the moment, but it asks for a CTC. So for this, the user is going to access another URL, which is MFA, right? And here it says out-of-bound interface. What's your policy name? You remember the policy name is POC, right? This one. So here, my policy name is POC. So it's up to you if you put here /POC. So directly it goes to your policy. So what's next? You're going to put your registered user, which is like a test 100, and the password is test 100. It asks here for a TOTP, right? So in this case, I'm going to use my application, get the code for test 100. This is not the final stage yet. So I'm going to give here code, my code 34370, submit. Then this is what called the out of band authentication, which is a random password it gives you. So I copy it, then I go back here and I'm going to paste it, then I'm going to log into it. So I used here a multi-factor authentication, but an out-of-bound method, an extra method. So I use first, I went to the website, for example, whatever, I name it, an authentication website or an external website or whatever. I put my TOTP code, which for the user, which has already been registered, and I registered it, right? Then it gave me a random password. Then I used it to log in, which is good, right? Thank you very much.